Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Plutus Awards podcast. I'm your host, Chris Browning, and I'm thrilled to be joining you all again. Our community is filled with hundreds of stories from creators and entrepreneurs just like you. Through this podcast, we plan to share these stories, from bloggers to podcasters, writers, speakers, and more. Miranda Marquit is taking over hosting duties today, so let's throw it over to her.
Today, we are so lucky to have with us, we have Jay Money of Budgets Are Sexy fame. And we're going to talk to Jay about his transition from selling his blog and how to figure out which projects are the right ones for you, because Jay's had a really interesting journey and made some really tough decisions in his blog business. And so I'm super excited to have you. So welcome to the show, Jay.
Hello, nice to be here. Hi, Plutus audience.
So let's just start with the big thing. Let's just start with the elephant in the room. You sold Budgets Are Sexy.
That's crazy, huh? It's still weird to hear that.
Now, you'd had other offers in the past, right?
Yeah, so I've been blogging for 12 years. And over the years, I mean, any blogger knows you get like random pitches. Oh, you want to sell your blog? You're like, yeah, what are you thinking? Oh, like $50, like what the hell, We've all gotten those ones. But yeah, in the last, I would say 4 or 5 years, I've gotten more serious offers. And I think it's one of those things that you just have to really be, there just has to be time for you, And I don't know, some people reach that point earlier, some later. I seem to take forever to make big decisions. And so one of the times someone offered me to buy Budgets Are Sexy, Rockstar Finance, pretty much like my whole online life.
No.
Yeah. And I went back and forth and I was like, no, yes. And I finally said yes. And then they took like a couple of months. And then I had changed my mind. And so this is like the first time I actually went through with it, which I'm really proud of myself for just doing it, It's been about 4 or 5 months after the sale and so far so good, but I'm also still blogging there every day. So it's not, like once I leave, I think that'll be where reality kicks in for my audience, for me. But for now, it's been, it's kind of the best of both worlds.
Now, you sold Rockstar Finance separately from Budgets Are Sexy. What was that like to have to separate your business out? I mean, you said somebody was going to buy it all, and then by the time you got to that point, you weren't ready for that. You had changed your mind again. What made you decide to spin off Rockstar Finance ahead of time and sell that separately? I mean, it was 2 or 3 years before you sold Budgets Are Sexy?
Yeah, it was a couple of years. So when I went to sell everything, I think I was at that point where I was having more kids. My family was growing. I didn't have much time. I was kind of burnt out and I didn't really know what to do next. Because I'm one of those people that I'll go all in for a little bit. And then I'm like 80% is pretty good. Do I need to push it, to get 90 or 100%? But then you get bored, you get stagnant. And so when the offer came to buy both, they were going to buy the sites, give me a chunk of money, and then hire me back to basically continue doing the same thing. It was exciting for the money. It was exciting for the change. But then I didn't do all the things on Rockstar Finance that I wanted to do. I was only curating. I didn't have I wanted to build a directory. I wanted to build a forum. I wanted to do more. And in between the couple of months of waiting, I kind of convinced myself it's time to go all in again and just re-energize. And so that was what ultimately ended that decision. Oh, and actually the weekend before I did that was the Plutus Awards, was FinCon.
Yeah.
And I remember I was up for a lifetime achievement.
Yeah, you were.
And I won it. Yeah.
Yeah, you
did. Which is funny for it's been 8 years or 9 years at that point, right? Which is a long time in blogging, but not lifetime.
Well, I mean, at the time it was.
Yeah. But I remember walking up there on stage and being man, I'm about to sell out, and I'm getting this award. And I don't know, it was a good timing because it gave me the edge, no, F that. I'm going all in. I'm doing it. Screw selling.
That's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah.
But then later you decided to go ahead and spin off Rockstar Finance and sell it separately.
Yeah. So then I did everything I wanted to do. I spent about 8 months building out everything. I finally got it all out of my system. I think there was only 1 or 2 things I didn't do, which is fine because I got a bulk of it out. And it was good. But then I was in the same spot. I think that's when I found I was about to have my 3rd kid. And I was like, you know what? This is just too much. And I went with a hike. So I was working weekends. I was working nights, as most, hustlers do. And I went on a hike with my kid. I remember thinking oh man, I'm out in nature and all he wants to do is hang out. And I'm busy thinking and worrying about work. And I had this epiphany. I was trying to figure out the components like when to keep doing something or ending. And I called it, I think it was like the triad of hustling or something. I was trying to figure out like what needs to happen in order for me to keep it or to sell it.
Right. And that's awesome.
Yeah. And the three things I realized, at least that motivate me, is like it either has to be like fun, make money, and then like the time factor, how much time. If it hits two of those three things really well, then I know that I'm on track. If it doesn't, like I should probably stop. And Rockstar, oh my God, it was making hardly no money. It took up a lot of time, like 4 or 5 hours a day, right? Like I was scouring hundreds of articles to curate. Then we were building directory. Then I was, the social media and all that good stuff. And then the fun factor, the fun was most days good, but the other two were bad. And looking at my kid, I was like, why am I continuing it? But it was hard because it was a successful project. And those are the hardest ones to kill. Actually, the podcast I did with Paula Pan years ago when we called it The Money Show.
Yeah.
Like it was successful. It was going up and up and up. And yet like that one, it didn't feel like me podcasting. So like that was a different decision. But it's easy to kill projects that are sucking. Right? It's hard to do ones that people like. And even to this day, I think someone in the FinCon Facebook group yesterday, their day before, was like, what do you guys miss about Rockstar? And just reading what people were saying years later.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like, I remember those days. That was good times. But yeah, it's one of those things that you have to move on at some point. So I started, let me get rid of that. And that was hard. I thought about maybe can I donate it to the community? Maybe can I sell like 100 shares and then 100 people can like take it over so it goes on forever? Like all kinds of ideas of figuring out how to keep it sustainable.
Right.
At the end of the day, I thought one person that I trusted, that I like, which was, John from ESI Money and, a veteran in the space. I thought that was the best chance for its survival. And then, it lasted for a year or two and then he sold it, which that part I didn't see coming at all. You never think about the other person after that first person you sell it to.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting. Let's dive into that a little bit more. You wanted to sell Rockstar to somebody you thought would like carry it on. So you picked the person you sold it to. And then like, how did you feel when you found out that he was turning around and selling it? So now we're going to do gossip. How did you feel like when you found out he was turning around and selling it so quickly? Because you thought, oh, well, he's going to sustain it and do the same thing for a while. So how did that make you feel?
It was kind of a mixture of emotions. I was shocked for sure because, like, I know in our talks, like, it was like, well, if maybe John doesn't want to take it over, maybe someone, like, he has kids, right? Older kids. Maybe one of his kids will take it over, right? Or maybe he'll, he thought, maybe I'll give it to the community or do something, right? So, like, those were kind of just our general talks about it early on. I think he planned on keeping it for a long time, right? And he, like, tripled the money. Like, he was making 3 or 4 times what he sold me. So he bought it from me in the low 6 figures and he multiplied it a lot.
Oh, wow.
So he was successful with it, at least in terms of business. Once you sell it, is it going to still be as good or bad? Like, other people, they have their opinions. But when he sold it, I was shocked because, it was fast. But what's more shocking to me was that the new person had it running and then like just went offline.
Right.
And it's still offline. And then it pops up, like it went offline for like, I don't know, 6 months. And then it popped up a little while ago and it looks redesigned and stuff. But it's weird to buy something, especially at that level, because now we're talking, multiple, 6-figure range. And then to do nothing with it is really astonishing. But since I don't own it anymore, I can have an opinion on it, but I can't do anything about it. And it's not even my place anymore because it's not mine. Right. And I think that's like the first thing that like I learned, that you have to be okay if the thing crashes and burns, that you're still okay with the decision, because that's the worst case that can happen, right?
Right.
and actually, worst case, I'll tell you, there's blogs that'll like give up their domain name and then spam sites or bots take it and redirect it. So there's like an old school blog rolls that are still around and you go clicking, oh, let's see what my old friend's up to. And you go there and then it takes you to a porn site. Like that's the worst case scenario.
Right. Yeah. Do you ever worry about that then sometimes, that your legacy will eventually be a porn site? Do you ever worry about that?
Yeah, I used to worry a lot about that stuff. And then I think having kids and once I had kids, I started living more in the real world. Like you get so sucked in online, right? And how it's like the world and everything matters. But then like the reality is it's just different and it doesn't, right? Like people move on and live on, right? And even like, like I said, in Facebook group, people are talking about Rockstar, and I'm like, oh, like no one can ever take that away from you. You still did it. Yeah, now it's like crap and it's non-existent. At least you still had that moment and it's still on your resume. You still did it. That's what I learned a lot over the years, but with lots of projects that no one can take away your successes, no matter what happens. And that's really, really empowering.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, you built this, it was successful. You still have that. So even if someday Rockstar Finance redirects to a porn site, you can still feel good about the thing you built and the fact that people will still be nostalgic about it even after it's a porn site.
Maybe it'll be the best porn site in the whole world. And then, hey, I can say I was the one that started it, right?
When you built Rockstar Finance, did you build it so that it would definitely be a separate entity from Budgets Are Sexy? Did that make it easier to spin off so you could sell it separately?
Yeah.
Because like I've seen things where people like do their secondary projects, but they're so ingrained with their primary project that you can't separate them.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I do struggle with that every now and then. The Rockstar one was meant to be separate for a couple of reasons. One, the blog, the blog is all about you, right? Budgets Are Sexy is all me and my thoughts on money, right? It's very self-centered in a way, but it's just like my thoughts. Like that's what a blog, normally is. And Rockstar was about everyone else. So I was away from it. I was curating and Kate was curating and I had some other helpers, but it was about everyone else. And so it had to be separate on that regard. And also, it's fun to have a totally separate project. And kind of my hope in the beginning was once we started went for a couple of months, I was like, this is really fun. And I could see myself long-term when I'm done writing on the blog that I could do Rockstar full-time as my second career. I'm still in the community. It's still fun. I still love the people. And what ended up happening, besides taking a lot of time, I literally scanned 200 or 300 a day. Like that's how many articles on money in our blogosphere at that time was producing, about 250 every single day articles. And I didn't read everything, but I scanned it. And it kind of actually motivated me to be a better writer because 80-90% of the stuff people put out is all the same, or it's boring, or it's crap, or it's all regurgitated. And then you get that small chunk that I call like gems, like the Rockstar stuff that just like are really powerful or really makes you think or entertains you. And so over time, I ended up pushing myself away from Rockstar and wanting to go back to the blog. And so I knew that wasn't for me long term. And then once the kid and the life stuff started happening, it was time to go. But you're right, separating it out is easier to sell either chunk. And it helps your brand. Like they're two different brands. So that helps a lot.
That's really cool that worked out that way. Now let's go back to Budgets Are Sexy. You sold it to the Motley Fool, right?
Yes.
For their network.
Yeah.
What made this deal the right deal?
I think similar to other stuff, I was just doing the same thing. I wasn't growing anything. I was just writing my thoughts and not really doing anything other than that. And I needed a change, but I also been getting into minimalism a lot too. And selling Rockstar was kind of eye-opening in that I realized that I'm fine if I don't own stuff. And even like a house, I went back to renting for a while. I'm getting rid of stuff. And the idea of pushing myself, what do I not need to own but still be happy? And the blog was the craziest, hardest thing for me to try and sell because it's so attached to me, ingrained in me. And it's just who I am online is the blog, right? And I thought without the blog, I'm nobody, and that's weird, right? Even if you make money, it's still just weird. It's been a fourth of my life, literally, writing for the blog. And so I think, the minimalism stuff coming into play and then really the team. So Motley Fool, they kind of had some people spin off a project called Soapbox. And they're the team that bought Budgets and they're starting to buy some other personal finance sites. They're kind of long-term vision of building this network and it's not heavily monetized. It's not like buying a blog and then turning it into crap, which a lot of, stuff happens when you sell a site. And even with Rockstar, right, eventually went down. That was the stuff that I don't have to worry about with them because they're well-funded and they've been around for a while. And their culture, is kind of edgy and different. They're not like they are a company, but it's more of more of a personality and brand, I guess. And the people are like, look, we want to buy it. We're not going to change much. We're not going to plaster it with ads. You tell us the best way for this thing to continue living on and keep your legacy alive. So I was much more in the loop with this one. If you go to the site now compared to 6 months ago, you won't notice anything different. It's probably faster because they sped things up. But really, at the end of the day, nothing's really changed. But mentally, it's not mine. And I don't know, I can pivot to something else if I'm ready to or whenever I'm ready to at any point, and that's really freeing for me.
That's really cool. And so you liked that when they were going to buy it, they weren't going to just make a bunch of changes and turn,
Yeah.
because we've seen that with other sites, right?
Oh, sure.
Where they buy it,
Yeah.
it becomes something totally different. It loses what made it interesting. It loses what made it cool.
Yeah. And I told them that, I said, honestly, I've never seen a financial blog sell and it either stay the same or get better. Like, it's never been done. And their answer was like, well, how do we do that? You tell me, it's your blog, you know it. Like, how do we not make that happen? You know? And I said, well, obviously, if I still write for it, it'll be fine for now. You know?
Right. Yeah.
And then B, like, don't plaster ads all over or put like payday loans or whatever, you know, people do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they haven't. They hired me back to write for it, you know? So, you know, the big challenge is really when I'm gone, what happens then? That's the big question. And so, you know, and that I'm a part of that, right? I'm gonna start looking for people that could maybe carry on the voice, maybe a different voice, right? Is it another personality? Is it a couple people? I don't know what the answer is because we've never seen it done, right? But I know that for the best possibility of it happening, at least I'm involved and I can put my best foot forward. They can put their best foot, and like odds are it'll be somewhat decent at least.
So that kind of involvement and that willingness to let you be involved and really direct things from the grave. So was that really
Yeah.
part of the decision that you made to move forward with the sale?
Yeah, I would say the timing was better. The financials, I was getting more for selling the blog than I was when I was selling it as a package a few years ago.
Oh, interesting.
And the stats were different too. Like, things had changed as well. Like, Rockstar was a lot smaller back then. Budgets was smaller, so that factors in. But then the team, like, they weren't like scammy, and they weren't like, they were just so laid back, like even a little too laid back, if I'm being honest with you. Like, and I don't know if I'm supposed to say this or not, but I'm going to say it anyways. Like, sometimes like I'd be like, hey, like some money's still coming to me and like, I don't own it anymore. You know, you guys own it. Like, should I forward this over to you? You know? I'm like, oh, that's cool. Just keep it. Like, we'll go ahead and get things transferred. Like, they're so laid back, but they're so focused on the future and the long-term growth and building of this network,
Right.
that they just want everything cool right now. And the other sites they've bought so far, I haven't seen much change either. And I think they're at like 3 or 4 different sites now. But that casualness, they're really friendly and they're really funny. And I like funny people. I don't know, it just makes you more happy to work with when people make you laugh, you know?
Right, for sure.
Yeah. And so I don't know. And it's exciting. It's an exciting time, right? When you sell a blog. You know, all these factors together, you know, and my minimalism thing help make it the right one at the right time. And I think that's something too I like to ask myself. Like, some decisions you can waver on, and then some is like, I don't think I can find a better deal like this. I kind of have to take it because it's just too good. And so that my only hesitation was, are they all talk? And if I sold, you know, they can literally fire me at any point. You know, like, they can fire me after listening to this if they don't like it, in theory. And then I don't have a blog. I don't have anywhere to write, you know, and I'm just on Twitter all day.
But would that really be terrible?
Yeah, I know. It's exciting too. Right? Good. I'll start over. You know, that's another thing too. Like non-compete stuff, right? Like, a lot of these other deals, like, oh, you can't start a blog for 3 years. Like, we own you for a while. And they're like, you know, like, look, if you want to start something, yeah, we're not going to take away your livelihood, right? If something doesn't work out, go start another blog. And if it's successful, we'll buy that one too. Like, they get it.
Yeah. And that's really cool because we've seen these folks that they sell their blog, they're in this like 5-year non-compete. And then as soon as the day after that 5-year non-compete is up, they're like throwing up a new blog and they're like ready to go.
I'm back.
So you didn't have that restriction. And so just a lot about
that made me feel good.
Yeah.
Because I don't, like, believe me, like, even just blogging for this site every day still, like, I don't know, it takes a lot to write, you know, and I don't even want to start another blog, but knowing that I could in a worst case scenario made it easier, you know. And I had other things too. Actually, I called it my diva list.
Nice. Yeah, tell us. Tell us about your diva list.
Yeah, my diva list. So there's certain things, like, now at this stage of my life, like, I'm just not going to do. Over the years, I've stopped working nights and weekends. I will not open my laptop up on the weekend at all. I've been almost 2 years or over 2 years now. Nights rarely. So I said, I'm not going to work nights and weekends. I don't like to do speaking stuff or like do kind of these presentations for people. And like, I'm not going to do any of that. I said, I'm going to keep my Twitter because that's like important to me. You know, you can't own J Money. You can own the blog. J Money is my brand. Like, that's me, even though it's like a fake me, but it's still me, you know? And I said, here's my diva list. Does this change anything? You know? And they said, no, that's fine. Like, that works. I think they just really want to be with people that are happy doing their job because it makes their job better and it makes the whole ecosystem better. So they're very open and willing to accommodate if it makes sense. As long, like I can't say, I'm going to say the blog, but I'm going to keep the 20,000 email list. You can't do that. But my Twitter is still mine, right? So that was important to me that they did that. And some other places, there's no way in hell they're going to let you do that.
Yeah. So it was really about the situation where you were able to demand your own terms.
Yeah.
And then not only were you able to demand them, but you got them.
Yeah, I know, right? That's really crazy. I mean, I put some stuff in there expecting to be negotiated down, right? And I was like, well, what are the ones that I need and what are the ones that I can do without? And from what I hear, I think the other people that I've sold have also had similar experience. And it's also powerful too, because we don't need to sell the blog, right? Like that's a perk. Like we're already living the dream. To sell it and to keep writing for it, it's just like another extension, like it's cool, but it's not, you don't need it. And so I think being in a position like that where you're not like, oh my God, I need money. This is the end of my life. If you can be in that position, you can then ask for things. And because they're actually in the DC area too, so I can physically go to their office, which is also kind of nice for me.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, but if they're like, oh, you have to come in the office and work, every day and not telecommute, right? Or work from home, like that would definitely be a deal breaker.
Right.
So I think it comes down to like, do you feel like it's time for a change in your life? Are you okay with the worst case scenarios happening? Like, what's your dream world? Like, they always ask me to this day, and we kind of joke around about it. They're always asking like what my dream job is, what my dream world is. And I'm like, I'm already doing it. Like, stop asking. Like, I'm enjoying, like, this is great. I don't have crazy aspirations. I don't need to take over the world. I don't need to, I should say this. If this is important to some people, it wasn't as much for me. But if there's things you've always wanted to do with your blog or like spin off or do a conference or write a book or whatever the case is, but you don't have the resources or funds or time or skill, if you wanted to do that, they'll help transition it and fund to help you get to that point in your career.
Cool.
Yeah. And that was really exciting. Like there's no project that I'm desperately trying to make, but it's nice knowing that if I did, I can just pick up a phone and say, hey, I have this idea. It's an extension of the blog. You guys would benefit too from it. But this is where I see like my life for the next 3 or 4 years. And that's a good feeling to know that they'd listen and consider it.
Oh, wow. Jeez.
I know. I'm not trying to like convince people. But...
like I'm ready to sell my blog right now.
Yeah. But that's the thing. Had I sold to the other person years ago, like I wouldn't have known that existed because I just would have taken it, not out of desperation, but like I was in a tougher spot then where I couldn't negotiate and it was just like trickier for me.
Yeah.
And for a lot of projects and for a lot of people. So the cool thing about our world, I feel like, is people come and pitch you a lot of times for products or to buy. And so like I actually never had to go out and say, hey, I'm trying to sell my blog, like send me all the offers, right? Like it kind of, I don't know. It's a neat environment we're in, I feel like.
I like how you talked about like you were in a tougher spot a few years ago with that package deal, but then you stepped back from it. Does that kind of play into it too? Like if you're making a decision out of desperation, is that maybe a sign that maybe it's not the best decision? I mean,
probably. No, you're right. Yeah. And it's tricky and everyone reacts different. I'm a very emotional person. I just don't like to regret stuff or just to feel like, I don't know, like I didn't give it my personal best. And I knew when that first deal came around, I was like, I only did like one thing with Rockstar. I never upped my game. I was kind of lazy, and I just felt like if I'd sold, I'd always wonder what if.
Right.
And then when I did everything, that reservation went away because I'm like, awesome, I did it. And look, we have a directory and this is awesome. Great. Now I know what it's like. It's a lot better for me to sell at this point because I've got it out of my system. But also because I did those things, like the site was worth more and did more things. And that was the thing too, right? Rockstar was curation, but then we had original content, then we had a forum, and then we had the directory. And I do wonder if I should have spun out the directory from everything else or kept curation separate and kept the forum alive, right? Like that had its own components.
Right. Yeah. You still have that one. Well, now you can build a new one.
Yeah, good. I don't have a non-compete. You're right. But those are the things that like the desperation thing definitely plays a part for sure.
Yeah. So let's shift a little bit and go back to your money podcast with Paula.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that was wildly successful. Everybody was just like, yeah, that's going straight to the top. It's going to do all the things. And then like a few months later, you left. And,
no, I'm such a bad business person.
but no, I mean, and we all know that, we all love Paula, and we know it wasn't Paula.
Yeah, definitely.
We're going to get that out there right now. We all know it wasn't Paula.
No.
But what was it in your own life, in your own situation, that made you say, okay, I love Paula, I love this concept, but this is not right for me?
I just didn't feel like a podcaster at the end of the day. It's a really weird, I feel like a blogger, and that's natural for me. And I just feel like that's my people. And the podcasting, it's so different, and it's such a different. And I should also say I don't listen to podcasts, which also plays a part. I read and consume blogs. I feel like I'm more in that ecosystem. With podcasting, I've been on, I'm on a podcast right now.
Look at you.
I know. Woo.
Doing a podcast.
And I'll tell you, it's a lot more fun and a lot less work being on someone else's podcast than doing your own, as you know.
For sure.
But I don't know. And everyone says and podcasting, it's been popular over the years, and then it goes away. And then 5 or 6 years ago, it was just hot. Everyone was doing it. And I thought if I'm going to expand, this is what I need to do. This is part of it. And I've always wondered about it. And Paula and I, we talked every now and then, and she was like, is there any other project you'd ever want to do? Maybe we can collaborate one day. Or maybe I asked it. I couldn't remember. But I remember thinking podcasting is the only thing that I kind of wish I should try. And she's like, well, maybe we could do it together. And we talked about it and we did it. And her brain is really good in general, but really good on the spot. And she's really smart. And I think that plays really well into podcasting, where you're doing fast interactions and you're interviewing smart people. And I'm a little slow. I could talk about myself. That's easy because I know myself, but I'm slower at things. And then I'm like, oh, damn, I wish I would have done this or this. And with podcasting, it's all kind of real and raw. And so if I say something, or if I forgot something important, with blogging, you can go back and edit it. And podcasting is your one shot, especially when you're interviewing other people. You can't go back and be like, oh, let me call you back up and ask you again. And you could splice it all together. But anyways, you're pretty much done. You had your shot. So I don't know. I just didn't feel like me, but it was growing and it was fun. A lot of parts of it was fun. And I'll say this too. Usually I don't pay attention to hate as much. Blog, we all get hate if you're online, right? It's a part of the game.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm a woman on the internet.
Yeah. But podcasting, someone told me, because it's so personal, because in people's ears, it affects them a little differently. And so I got more negative comments from the podcast on 3 months than I did in 8 years of blogging at the time.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't enough to be no, I'm done. I can't take it. Not feeling like it was me was definitely a part of it, the biggest part. But that part was also why am I pushing myself to do this if I don't care about it as much? And I started not looking forward to talking to Paula, right? Because anytime we talked, we were doing podcasting stuff. And I was like, why would I just not want to call you right now and do this? It was a chore. It wasn't fun. Anyways, yeah, all those things together kind of made the decision. But I will tell you this, which is interesting. In all the years blogging anonymously, no one has ever come up to me on the street and say, oh, are you J Money? On the podcast, it was only, 2 or 3 months. I've had 2 people in real life come up to me and say, I recognize your voice. Where do I know it from? And it was from the podcast. Isn't that crazy?
That is way crazy.
Yeah.
So what was that like then when you had to tell Paula you wanted to step back? How do you navigate that, especially when it's a relationship with somebody that you respect and like?
Because I am in tune with my emotions, I started mentioning to her oh, this is weird. I'm not feeling it today for some reason. I say things a lot aloud. And so it wasn't a complete shock to her when I brought it up. She could see it. And she told me when I brought it up, she's like, I'm not surprised by that. That was probably one of her first lines to me. I said, okay, all right. Well, that's good. I think my biggest open communication was really good in this case. But then also I kind of had some options of what that means for the future, right? I wasn't going to be there, but I kind of wanted to make sure that she knew, she can continue on or she can spin off or do whatever. I didn't want to I was more afraid of ruining her shot at doing it, because this was her first time podcasting too.
Right. Yeah. And then of course she's gone on to do amazing, incredible things.
Oh, crazy. Right. That's because I jumped off. Right. So that was my biggest fear. And so I said, look, do whatever you want to do. I'll support you. If you want to keep all these episodes or you want to scrap them all, Like, just let me know how I can help you continue if you want to continue. And I had a feeling she did want to continue. She said, okay, she like marinated on. And, she eventually said, I'm just going to do this thing myself. It was also, by the way, the first time either of us, well, I've done it before, but the first time she's collaborated with someone else on a project, like in this nature. And I remember her also thinking, oh, good, I can like make all the decisions by myself. And that's an important one because with people that are like in this world, usually our personalities are kind of the same, right? You both kind of want to lead it and both kind of want to run it. And so that gave her a lot more freedom to do what she thought was good and right. And we agreed on like 80% of the stuff, but there were some things where she wanted to do that I didn't think was good, or I wanted to do that she didn't think was good. So this let her just go with it and not have to, like, I didn't have to hold her up. I wasn't the bottleneck anymore. So that made it good. And obviously she's doing good now.
That's good. So how does somebody put together a framework where they are, as you said, I mean, you mentioned you being in touch with your emotions. How does somebody put together that framework where they can understand this and go through and evaluate these things in a way to help them move forward on their path?
That is a really good question. See, I'm slow, so now I'm trying to figure out the answer to tell you.
It's okay. It's going to be edited.
Okay, good.
All the time you need.
No, I think you kind of have to just be aware. You don't have to be in touch. Like, you just have to be aware of your emotions. And like with the podcast, like I started just not enjoying going to it and making the call to her or having guests on. Like I started kind of cringing a little bit. And that's always the first sign in anything, in your career, in a project. If you're not excited to be there, I think that's a problem. Some people are better at separating it and still doing the job. But I think lifestyle design wise, that is super important. For me, over the years, now been, 12 years, figuring out what I want my life. Like I know when someone says like, what is your dream or what do you want in this world? I want like my ideal lifestyle. Like that's my answer. And my ideal lifestyle is to be excited about what I'm working on in the morning, have time for my kids, have time to do nothing, have time to do something new. It's just, I want to have that freedom and control. And so the podcast took the time and was adding a more negative factor into my lifestyle. And that sounded alarm bells. When I went to sell certain the sites in the beginning, like it solved one problem, but alarms went off in the other side. And so I think if you can focus on your lifestyle and figure out like, oh, like I love waking up in the morning and blogging or exercising or whatever it is, that's a good sign. Like if you're enjoying the ride, whatever ride that is, you keep going, that's like really, really good. You can get roadblocks, and sometimes roadblocks are just like problems that you need to get over, right? Because you're going to have them. But I also feel like if you hit roadblock, and you're like, damn, like I keep hitting all these roadblocks, like it's probably a sign that like something needs to change, right? Maybe it's you, maybe it's the community, maybe it's like a different angle. My aunt once said, like, when things are going well, like super well, and you don't understand it, but just going well, just keep writing it until like it stops.
Nice.
And with the blog, that's what it was. I had a 9 to 5 and the blog was taking off. And I'm like, my wife was like, you're working 2 full-time jobs. You can't continue like in the first couple of years.
Right.
And
yeah.
she's like, what are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I can't stop the blog because it's going so well and it's fun. I just can't stop that. Like, that's crazy. But at the same time, I can't quit my job to be a blogger.
What is that anyway?
What is a blog?
What is happening?
Yeah, fortunately for me, I got laid off of my job and I said, great, I'm a full-time blogger now.
Nice. So what would have happened to you, think? Like, I mean, it sounds like your wife was really pushing you to think about these things and take stock of like, well, what do I want my life to look like?
And she was seeing the effect of it because I was spending more time on the computer and away from her. So she told me to think about it and make a decision. And I'd come to that decision. The decision was to blog full time, but I was a wuss, right? I didn't want to pull the trigger. And I think it was the day of or the day before. It was like literally right when I decided that is when I got laid off. So it was like really crazy, crazy timing. So I did it and I said, all right. And I got fired on my wife's birthday. And I said, honey, I'm going to be a little late. I'm going to have some beers and I'm going to just marinate on what just happened, which for the good or the bad, I don't know. I had to do that for me, but it just sucked that it was on her birthday, and we came up with a plan like, all right, try this for a few months. Worst case in 3 months, you can go back and apply to another job, and I said, okay, that's like a good worst case. Like, let's just see what happens. And it just went well and I never had to. But I will say this, It is weird when you have a full-time job and a hustle. And then when your full-time job goes away and your hustle remains, it's going to sound so stupid, but you lose a big chunk of money when you lose your job.
Right?
Or like that hustle money that was fun on the side is like actually like now you need to live off of it. I did not think about that. Like I got it, like I thought it a little, but it wasn't until I was living it. And I remember 3 months in, and I wrote about this years ago, is your perfect job worth it if you're not making that much money?
Right.
I want to say, I could have the numbers wrong because it was a long time. I feel like I was making like 60 or 70,000 at the 9 to 5, and I think 30 or 40,000 on the blog in a year.
Yeah.
And so I went from essentially like 90 or 100,000 down to 30 or 40. And that was a big shock. And that was the thing, right? Like I went back to lifestyle. Like that's always my guiding point. Like, what is your perfect lifestyle? Do you want to go to a 9 to 5 or do you want to do this blogging thing and see what happens? And I chose that.
Right. Yeah. How did having a partner who, I mean, you know, your wife had a job, right?
Yeah, that made it easier. She had a 9 to 5, except she then quit and for 7 years went to get a PhD. And then we had kids and all that led up to the whole, like, should I sell or keep going? Because I needed money. I was stressed. That was up to the first, when I almost sold everything.
When you almost sold but didn't, and you said it wasn't right, how close did you get to selling at that point? Because I mean, you're talking about your wife was just coming off this PhD program. You've got kids. You're like, and like selling would have solved your immediate problems.
It would have. Yes.
What dragged you back from the edge?
It's funny. So I first told them no. And then about after 2 weeks, I said, oh my God, like you're an idiot. Like you need this money. I just need like a kick in the ass to like get hustling again. And they were going to pay me to keep doing it. So I would have kept continuing, but I needed that jolt. I said no first and I thought about it. I said, I changed my mind. I do want to do the deal. And they said, great, give me a week. We'll send you the contract. And they took 2 months. I didn't know that they were in the process of being sold themselves.
Oh my gosh.
That's what the delay was. That's another thing to think about, right? What if Motley Fool sells to someone else and they're like, you're out of here. I'm not going to pay you money to blog at your own site. Like we need to make money. When that was happening, I switched again. So I said no, then I said yes. And if they sent me a contract, within that week, I would have sold it and this conversation might not be happening.
Right.
But, the world works differently, depending what's going on, right? It worked in my favor and they delayed. FinCon happened. I won the award. I got my mojo back and I'm like, F it. I'm going all in on myself again. Screw the consequences. And it worked out. And I think probably if I was an outsider, I would say like it's a lot about like self-confidence and I don't know, kind of trying to take a step back and see like, what do you really need in life? Like, what do you actually care about? I've never cared about the money, which is so ironic because all we do is talk about money. And in the beginning, I probably did. I remember wanting to be a millionaire because I thought it was cool in the beginning. But once you reach a certain point, for me, is around about 400,000 net worth. That's when I was like, okay, I feel solid. I don't care about money as much anymore. So selling the blog, even selling it to Motley Fool, it was money, but it wasn't like life-changing money. Like my life is still almost exactly the same. I feel free. I have freedom, but nothing really changed hardcore.
Kind of what you've been talking about, and then I know I talk about this a lot too for my own life, is figure out that lifestyle first. Figure out what you want and then use money as that tool. Like money is the means to the end rather than the end product. And then also I just liked how you pulled back from the brink of making this decision to sell a few years ago based on fear. So many times we make these decisions based on fear. And then like you said, if you had sold, then you would have always wondered what could have been.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? And if they weren't in the process of selling, I would have sold and, maybe it still would have gone good. Maybe they would have funded it or I don't know, who knows? But at least I did it on my own. And that was the thing too. I remember them thinking, like they didn't say like good luck with doing all that. But like I got the sense that they're like, you're going to be back again, next year. Like that's like the sense I got. And they were probably right to think
be
that.
Back.
That's what I feel like it was their response, And I also, they're a company that seemed that they were the people I liked were good. Well, I don't want to say too much, but I am glad that it didn't happen and that I'm with this new group for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing a little bit of your journey. This has been awesome. So if people want to hang out with you more online, where should they go?
Well, my favorite place is Twitter at Budgets Are Sexy, which I own. Yay!
Sweet.
Or Twitter owns, I guess I should say.
Yeah, technically.
And then my kind of online resume / where you can find what I'm doing is jmoney.biz, just the letter J, then money.biz. And that's my online portal. And then I have a newsletter there that will go out once a week that has like articles I write around the web and on the blog. So that's another good way. So I love talking to people online. It's fun.
Big thanks to Miranda for taking over hosting duties today, and I appreciate all of you for coming back and joining us here for another episode. I know it's hard to believe, but next week will be our final episode of the season, and I can't think of a better guest to end the season with than Joe Salsihai of Stacking Benjamins and Money with Friends. So make sure you're subscribed so that way you get that episode and more from us here at the Plutus Awards Podcast. You can learn more about our guests and the Plutus Awards podcast at plutusawards.com/podcast and on Instagram at Plutus Awards. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and remember to keep creating.